Hi everybody, it's Barbara with Acting for Community Theatre. Today, before I go on to talk about how to actually learn your monologue, I thought I'd better step back and go through my 15 tips to learning lines. So this tutorial, I guess you would call it, will help you whether you're doing a monologue or whether you're working on a full production. Either way, these 15 tips to help you learn your lines will help you. So let's get started. Okay, my first tip is simply attitude. If you look at learning your lines like, oh my God, I'll never get it done, or you look at learning your lines like, hey, this is going to be fun. I want to challenge myself. I want to challenge my brain. This is going to work. I can't wait to open this play up or this monologue up and find all the good stuff in it. This is going to be fantastic. If your attitude is that, if it's that positive and exciting and you're looking forward to challenging yourself, your brain is going to help you learn that monologue. Attitude is a huge thing. It's my number 2 best tip. My number 1 best tip comes right at the end. So stay right where you are. Number 2 is to find a nice quiet place in order to learn your lines. Don't try to do it where there's a TV blaring or a radio going off or there's dogs barking or a construction site is nearby. Find somewhere that you're comfortable, because the more relaxed and calm and comfortable you are, the better you're going to be able to absorb your lines. Number 3 is stick to a schedule. Now, if you're just working on a monologue, this can be very short bursts. Probably no more than an hour I would work on a monologue, like in a day. But if you're doing something a little bigger and you've got a lot of lines, then you might want to schedule a couple of hours. But that's about as much as I would do every single day. But it's better to have a schedule. Giving yourself a routine, again, helps your brain access and take in information. Our brains love routines and patterns. So try to schedule the same sort of thing at the same sort of time in the same sort of place every day. Number 4 is to use visualization. This is very important with monologues or sections of a play where there's a big story involved or you're remembering something, like it's a memory that you need to talk about. Visualizing it is the key to actually taking it in and making it your own enough so that you can reproduce that memory truthfully. So you want to basically close your eyes and imagine all the different things that are in that memory or that story. You want to visualize them really clearly, like you were right there, and add sensory information. You need to put yourself in that place, take yourself through that memory, through the monologue, and make it your own. So hear it, see it, smell it, feel it, really take it in until it feels like it happened to you. If you put yourself there, using your script as your guide, you're going to take that monologue in and really make it your own. Number 5 is to write your lines out. Now, you can either write them out or type them out. This is sort of like number 5 and number 6. It's the same sort of idea. It's just some people, the hand on a page and the act of actually writing cements it into your brain, and other people find that typing it on a keyboard does the same thing, or you could try both. But they actually are pretty effective because they're using another way that your brain retains information. They're using something physical in order to put those words inside, and that's a really big game changer. Number 7 is a favorite among all actors, and that's simply to highlight them. What I like to do is say my line, highlight it, and say it again, and then move on to the next line. It's one of the first things I used to do with my scripts is, of course, highlighting the lines, which shouldn't be the first thing you do with a script you're unfamiliar with. But however, when you go to sit down to highlight your lines early in the process, just say them out loud, highlight them, and then say them out loud again and move on. It all helps. Number 8 is to use auditory learning, to use your aural sense. Record yourself and listen to it. over and over again. Listen to it while you're taking a walk with the dog. Listen to it while you're doing the dishes. Listen to it over and over again. Now, the key here is when you do it, you have to do it in a somewhat neutral tone, because what you don't want to do is you want to say it a certain way early on in the process while you're learning your lines, and then later on you found all kinds of reasons to change the way you say something, because now you've got action happening. Now you're putting verbs under those lines, and now it's different. So you don't want to memorize it the way you've said it, because that might lock it into your brain. And you might even find that you can identify mistakes or missteps, let's say, once you listen to it and you just think to yourself, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. How did I get from here to there? I don't know what happened there. And then that's actually good, because you can go back and really start learning it, because learning the moments is going to be one of the most important things. But try recording yourself and practicing and listening it back to it, because then if you're an auditory learner, that's going to help a lot. There's a technique called the memory palace. And if you're really struggling, you can try a version of this technique to help you with lines or a monologue. So with this method, you create a series of environments, and you tie keywords to sections of your monologue to that environment. So, for example, I wrote a play called Muse, where there was a section where Vicky is confessing to Grace what happened when Grace was injured as a child, because Vicky was there. So the first line was, I think, I was just a kid, Grace, 13. So I could imagine, for example, a cottage by a creek, and the first step could be the front porch, and the front porch might have a kid playing about Grace's age at the time, or something else that would connect me to that story, and then on the cabin door might be a number 13. And as I move through the cottage, I would find different signposts that I would create for different moments in the play and different ideas in the monologue. So the memory that you want to talk about flows with the play or the monologue that you're discussing. And as you go from room to room and space to space, you're finding different signposts, different visual clues. Like at one point, there's a story in that monologue about her falling through the ice, and she's trying to get her little sister out of the ice, and she's pounding on the ice. So you could have a section where somebody was pounding on something, or there would be ice present, or something that would remind you what that next section is about. And you would just walk through the rooms. And it's sort of like, it's kind of a different, weird version of actually visualizing the monologue. But in this case, what you're doing is you're going through an environment, which is why they call it the memory palace, and you're connecting different signposts to different moments in your monologue. So that's something to check out. Maybe Google memory palace and see what you think. This might be something that works for some people. It's interesting. And number 10 is, once you start getting a handle on that monologue or that scene, then start doing Italian runs. As we all know, Italian runs can really help set the lines into your brain. And it's a good way for you to quickly identify places where you're kind of stuck. Places where you just can't get that line. It's just not going in there, or it sounds like another line and they're very close, and now you're always getting them mixed up. So use an Italian to cement the lines that you do have and identify the problem areas that you can really focus on and work. Number 11, when you do find those weird changes or those stuck moments that you have, identify what the problem actually is. Once you identify what these problems are, then you can start drilling down and working on them. You could be tripping over a list, or you could be tripping over specific things like names or dates or numbers. Some lines might feel like they're coming out of left field and you don't know why you're saying them. You have to understand why. You have to understand what's going on with your character and why are they doing this? Why are they giving you a list? Why are they repeating the same sort of thing 3 times but in different ways? Why are they stuck on numbers? Why are they even talking about numbers? You have to figure this stuff out. And as soon as you figure out what makes sense to the character, it will start making sense to you. In other words, understanding the problem that the character is having will help you understand the problem of how to get those lines in there. Number 12, when you do get stuck and you do have a problem like what I just talked about, one of the ways of fixing it is to create links between things. Say you're standing at your mother's funeral in the scene, and this guy named Frank comes up for some reason, and you can't figure out why. Then just find a way to connect it. Like you're at the funeral and you look over and you see some flowers. So flowers are very common at a funeral, and it reminds you of the flowers at your wedding, and that reminds you of your best man who really screwed up the speech that he made at your wedding, and his name was Frank. Something dumb like that only means something to you can help you remember your lines, because all you have to do is get a little piece of blocking in there that no one else even has to know about, where you're talking about whatever you're talking about at this funeral, and you just look over and see a flower. And if you can remind yourself, as soon as I say this line, I look over, and I mean, obviously you don't have to see a flower, but in your brain you can. And as soon as you know that that's what you have to do, it's a bit of blocking. Blocking, it works wonders for remembering lines. So all you have to do is remind yourself, as soon as I say the end of that line, I look over and I see a flower. And that suddenly kicks off that whole chain of thought. And suddenly you know that when you see that flower, you remembered Frank. Those kinds of silly things, those kinds of little actor tricks, the way we can link things, or the ways that we have of connecting different words or sites or whatever it is, a movement or a prop or create some blocking, are the things that help actors remember their lines. So these next two notes are about helping your brain remember. And one of them is listening to classical music while you're studying. And I know from my days in university and from studies that have been done on university students that they will retain more information while they study if they're listening to classical music. For some reason, it opens up the brain in a way that helps that information be retained in their little memory banks. So that would be number 13. Number 14 is a little bit weird. It sounds a little strange, but there have also been studies that show that walking backwards increases memory. I know that sounds crazy, but I've actually tried it. I've tried it because walking backwards is really good for knees, and I have sore knees. But also there are studies that showed that it helps with memory, and I've sort of tested that, and indeed it does work. So even doing 20 or 30 backward steps, try to make sure that you've got somebody with you, or you've got a railing or something to hang on to, or at least a nice flat surface outside on some grass, and walk 20 or 30 steps before you study your lines and after you study your lines. And it is really amazing that it really helps memory. And number 15 is the last, number one crucial step to remembering your lines. And that is certainly to understand the moment that you're responding to. If you understand what that moment is, then your line is going to make sense. If you understand what you want, what you just got or heard, or where you are in your monologue, what you're thinking, what you're reacting to, what you just discovered, whatever moment that is for you, if you understand that moment and what you want, where you want to get to, your line is going to make a lot more sense. And as soon as it makes sense to you, we've kind of said this already, as soon as it makes sense to your character and makes sense to you, you will remember that line. So, knowing what you want and why you want it and what you're responding to in this moment is all going to help you remember those lines. And that is one of the most important things that actors do, is to understand those things. What do I want? How am I getting it? What am I really getting? What's actually coming back to me? And how do I get closer to what I want? Okay, these are my tips and tricks. Try them, see what works for you, and enjoy the process above all. Okay, that's it for me today. Thanks for listening, and I will see you soon.